A casual video from my aunt, sent late at night, ended up being the recording that shattered every illusion I had about my family. My name is Claire, and I'm 34 years old. 3 weeks ago, something arrived in my messages that I wasn't prepared for. No explanation, no context, just a video file from my aunt. I assumed it was something lighthearted, maybe a funny clip or a reminder about an upcoming event. I pressed play, expecting nothing unusual. What I got instead was the sound of my entire family laughing at my expense. My brother called me a failure. My mother dismissed me with a single sentence that cut deeper than anything I'd ever heard. For 6 years, I'd been covering their expenses, the mortgage on my mother's house, my brother's vehicle payments, my sister's rent, private school tuition for my niece and nephew, and there they were, laughing about how I should be grateful. I didn't say a word that night. I simply opened my laptop and started doing what I do best. By the time the next round of payments came due, everyone at that table would understand exactly what they'd been mocking, and exactly what it was going to cost them. Welcome to Mind Unveiled Stories, where the quietest person in any room often turns out to be the one holding everything together, and where self-respect always outlasts the noise. If you've ever been the dependable one, the one no one thanks, this story is for you. Leave a comment and consider subscribing. It was a Thursday night, late enough that the entire street had gone dark. I was at my own kitchen table, eating leftover soup with one hand and reviewing receipts for a hardware store client with the other. That's my life. I handle the books for 3 small businesses in town, and the work follows me home. My phone buzzed against the counter. A text from my aunt. No words attached, just a video file sitting there like an unopened package. I figured it was something forwarded. Maybe a cute animal video. Maybe a reminder about my mother's upcoming party. I wiped my hands on a towel and tapped the screen. The display cast a cold blue light across my ceiling, and the audio crackled through the tiny speaker before the image even fully loaded. Laughter. I recognized every single voice in that room. My mother's deep, amused chuckle. My brother's booming laugh, the kind he gets after his second drink. My sister's quick giggle, the one she uses when she wants everyone to know she's on the winning side. The camera was positioned across a dining table I'd sat at countless times. This was the dinner from the previous week, the one I couldn't attend because I was finishing a month-end close for a client. They went ahead without me. They always could. I turned the volume higher. My soup sat untouched beside me, growing cold, and I didn't care. I leaned toward that glowing screen the way you lean toward a conversation when you hear your own name mentioned. Because someone in that video had just said Claire, and the entire table had erupted in laughter. My brother Derek was on his feet, glass raised. He does this regularly, turns nothing into a performance. He's most comfortable when all eyes are on him. He was mimicking me, hunched posture, squinting eyes, fingers tapping an invisible calculator. "Here's to Claire," he announced, and the table was already grinning. 34. No partner, no children, just her spreadsheets. A complete failure who happens to be good at counting other people's money. My sister Megan laughed into her wine. "Be nice," she said, in that tone that means the opposite. And then my mother Patricia, at the head of the table, raised a hand to quiet them like she was the voice of reason. "Oh, leave her be," she said. "She's doing fine. She should be grateful, honestly. At least her money gives her something to feel important about." The entire table dissolved into genuine laughter. The kind that only happens when everyone assumes the subject of the joke will never find out. The cruelest words are the ones spoken when you're not in the room. I watched my aunt on the edge of the frame. She laughed too, but her gaze dropped to her plate and stayed there. I sat in my dark kitchen, waiting for the tears to come. But they didn't. Something far colder arrived instead. something measured and precise, like a ledger that finally balances. I reached out and paused the video on the exact frame where my mother's mouth was still open around the word grateful. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I reached for the one thing in my life that has never deceived me. My ledger. You should understand who I am before you decide what to think about what I did. I'm a bookkeeper. I manage the finances for a hardware store, a veterinary clinic, and a small bakery that would have gone under if I hadn't caught the errors. I taught myself most of it, then formalized it with night classes at the community college while working during the day. No one gave me anything. I earned every client by being accurate to the penny. People trust me because numbers don't have emotions, and neither do I, at least not on paper. That's where I'm competent. People are the part I never quite figured out. When I concentrate, I click my pen repeatedly, a habit my coworkers find amusing. I was doing that without realizing it. Here's what I'll admit, because this story doesn't make sense without it. I have a weakness, but it isn't being soft. It's the opposite. I take on burdens before anyone asks. A bill appears, I pay it. A crisis emerges, I handle it alone at this very table in the middle of the night. I never learned how to need anyone, so I made myself indispensable to everyone. I convinced myself that was strength. I'm skilled with numbers. I'm far less skilled with people who treat generosity like an automatic subscription they signed up for and forgot about. My family had been on that subscription for 6 years. I simply hadn't presented them with the final statement yet. It started with the house. 6 years ago, my father passed away suddenly, and he left behind the home I grew up in, along with a mortgage he'd been quietly losing. The bank sent letters that you don't show anyone. My mother couldn't refinance on her own. She hadn't worked in 30 years. My brother's credit was destroyed. My sister had no income to document. So the bank looked at all of us and found exactly one person whose name made the numbers work. Mine. I met with a loan officer and purchased the house. My name on the deed, my name on the mortgage, my signature on every document that mattered. My mother stayed in her home without packing a single box. That's what I wanted. I didn't do it to claim ownership. I did it so she wouldn't lose her home the same year she lost her husband. Everyone in the family knew I'd handled the house. That was their word for it. Handled, like I'd called a repairman. They'd mention it casually at gatherings. Claire took care of the house situation. Light, dismissive, a footnote. Not one of them in 6 years ever asked whose name was actually on the title. They didn't want to know. Knowing would have meant the house wasn't really my mother's anymore. And the narrative they preferred was one where Patricia held everything together alone. I let them have that story. I was just the footnote paying the mortgage on the home where they all gathered to mock me. The house was only the beginning. After that, the requests came like water through cracks. My brother's vehicle loan when his landscaping business failed for the second time. My niece and nephew's private school tuition. Because Megan insisted they couldn't possibly leave mid-year. Megan's rent after her marriage ended, a temporary arrangement that stretched into 4 years. And my mother, the constant trickle, the electricity bills, the medication costs, the property taxes on a house I already owned. Every month it was the same procedure. The first of the month, I'd sit at this table with my coffee and my spreadsheet, and I'd transfer funds. Click, confirm, Derek, Megan, the school, the utility company, my mother. I never publicized it, never mentioned it at dinner, never said a single word out loud. I just did it, like watering a plant. Except this plant had grown thorns. I maintained a column for each of them in my private records, tracking every payment like any account. But I'd never calculated the total across 6 years. I'd never highlighted the entire column and let the sum appear at the bottom. Some part of me knew that number would be a mirror, and I wasn't ready to see what it reflected. Adding it up felt like acknowledging something I didn't want to face. So I didn't. Until the night my family told me on video that I should be grateful for the privilege of supporting them. I know what you're thinking. How does someone with my profession, someone who understands numbers, allow this to continue for 6 years? It's a reasonable question, and I've asked myself the same thing repeatedly. Let me be direct about this. I wasn't blind. I attempted to address it. About 3 years in, I sat down with my brother and gently asked if he could contribute even partially to his children's tuition now that he was employed again. My mother found out before I'd finished my coffee. She called and interrupted me. "Your brother is struggling, Claire. You're the capable one. Don't you dare make this about yourself." So I dropped it. Another time, I proposed a family meeting to discuss finances. Just a conversation. The meeting I scheduled had exactly one attendee. Me, I continued paying, but not because I was naive. I continued because the alternative had a face. Stop the tuition mid-year and a 9-year-old gets removed from school in front of his classmates. Stop the mortgage and my widowed mother loses the house she buried my father from. These weren't abstract concepts. They were real people who would genuinely suffer, and I was the only adult in the room who seemed to grasp that. So I told myself the story everyone in my position tells themselves. I told myself that beneath the taking, they loved me. That gratitude was simply hidden somewhere I couldn't see. That's the lie I survived on. And the video, when it finally arrived, was merciful in exactly one way. It destroyed that final illusion. I didn't sleep much that night. But the next morning, I still made coffee, because I'm not someone who lets a crisis derail an ordinary Tuesday. I sat at the table, opened my laptop, and my hand froze over the spreadsheet with the recurring transfers that execute on the first of each month. The next cycle was due in 19 days. I counted them on the calendar by the refrigerator. Then, I noticed something that made my skin prickle in a way the video hadn't. The first of the month fell on a Saturday this year. The same Saturday as my mother's 60th birthday celebration. The celebration I was funding. The celebration where the entire extended family and half the town would gather to honor Patricia's supposed strength. I sat there, my coffee cooling again, and for the first time in 6 years, I didn't click transfer. I opened a new browser window instead. I pulled up 6 years of banking history, every account, every statement, and I began reviewing it the way I review a client's records when something doesn't add up. I want to be honest with you about what this was. I wasn't seeking revenge. I genuinely wasn't. I was conducting an audit. There's a distinction between those two things. But by the time I finished, I'm not sure even I could have distinguished where one ended and the other started. That weekend, I watched the recording again, not to dwell on it, but to examine it with the same scrutiny I applied to numbers. I advanced through it frame by frame, pausing on each person's expression. I needed to understand exactly who was involved and to what degree. My brother Derek was the loudest. Unsurprisingly, he was the one on his feet, performing. My sister Megan was the chorus, laughing on cue as she always does to maintain her position. My mother was the conductor, her raised hand silencing them, her dry remark provoking them. She should be grateful. She didn't even need to raise her voice. And then there was my aunt, half outside the frame, holding the phone. She was the one recording. She laughed when everyone else laughed, always a beat behind, her eyes lowering afterward. I watched how she moved the camera around the room, and I realized something that stopped me entirely. My aunt filmed this, and then, 3 days later, she sent it to me. No explanation, no apology. just delivered the entire thing to the one person it would destroy. I leaned back and clicked my pen slowly. I couldn't determine yet whether this was an accident or deliberate. A clumsy mistake, or a woman who couldn't speak the truth aloud, handing me evidence and hoping I'd act on what she couldn't say. I didn't know which, but I knew I'd discover the truth before this ended. The strangest aspect was how ordinary everything remained. 2 days after I'd watched my family dismiss me, my phone buzzed with the usual messages, as though nothing had shifted. My brother, "Hey, truck insurance is due. Can you handle it this month?" Tight situation. No greeting, no appreciation, just the request, like placing an order. Then my sister sent me a link to a dining set. $1,100 with a note, "What do you think? Would look perfect in the apartment." What I thought was that she was requesting permission to spend my money without even recognizing she was doing it. Then my mother called, and I let it go to voicemail. "Claire, honey, have you confirmed the caterer? People are RSVPing. Don't delay. And please don't be awkward at my party. You know how withdrawn you get. Everyone will be watching. Everyone will be watching." I nearly laughed aloud in my empty kitchen. She had no idea how accurate she was about to be. Not one of them knew I'd seen the video. Not one of them suspected the woman funding everything had finally begun to calculate. And that, I realized, was the only real advantage I'd ever possessed in this family. Time. For the first time in 6 years, I had time. And they were unaware the clock was running. So, I did what I do. I created a clear record, not a rant, not an emotional diary, a ledger. I opened a new workbook and created a tab for each of them. My brother, my sister, the school, the utilities, my mother. Then I went back 6 years, statement by statement, and recorded every transfer. The date, the amount, the recipient, the purpose where I knew it. I didn't inflate the numbers. I didn't add commentary. I simply recorded the facts, line by line. My pen clicked steadily, no shaking at all. There's a tranquility that settles over me when I organize chaos. The world ceases to be a place where my family laughed at me and becomes a series of figures that either balance or don't. I printed a test page to feel its weight in my hand. Black ink on white paper. Dates and dollar amounts. No emotional language. And here's what I understood, holding that page under the light. I wasn't constructing a weapon. Weapons are loud. I was creating a mirror. And the most devastating thing you can offer certain people is an honest reflection. I drove to my aunt's house that Sunday, telling her I was returning a casserole dish, which I was. She made coffee, and we sat in her kitchen while I let the quiet work the way it does with a client hiding something. Finally, she broke. "You saw it," she said, not a question. I didn't respond, which was its own reply. Her hands tightened around her mug. I realized it went to you after I sent it. "I saw your name. I could have taken it back. I just didn't." She looked at me, and there was genuine shame in her expression. I should have stopped them. Years ago. The first time they started, I should have said something. I just didn't want to become their next target. There it was. The entire toxic machinery of that family in one statement. Everyone too afraid of the table to protect anyone else at it. I asked softly, "Was that the first time?" She avoided my gaze. "No, honey, that's just dinner. That's how they talk about you when you're not present." She explained it was a regular occurrence. The Claire jokes, as dependable as dessert. I thanked her for the coffee. I understood her. She'd given me the one kindness no one else had. She'd shown me the truth. But understanding someone and relying on them are different matters entirely. My aunt had provided the evidence and then distanced herself from whatever I chose to do with it. I drove home, knowing I was, as always, alone. I conducted a small test. I wanted to observe how quickly the attitude shifted when the money slowed, even slightly, so I paid my sister's rent 3 days late deliberately. Just a small adjustment. The response told me everything I needed to know. My mother called within an hour, not my sister, whose rent it actually was. My mother, the family's financial manager, calling to demand an explanation. "Claire, what is happening with you?" she began, her voice sharp. Megan's landlord contacted her. 3 days late. "Everyone is saying how distant you've become. Ever since you got busy with your work, you think you're superior to us." I held the phone away and stared at it. 3 days, 6 years of perfect punctuality. And the first time I'm 3 days behind, I'm cold. I'm impossible. I think I'm better than them. "Money was never your issue, Claire," she declared. "Your attitude is." I said I'd handle it and ended the call. I sat motionless. 3 days late, and I'd become the family villain. So I allowed myself to calculate what 6 years of perfect, silent, timely payments had actually purchased me. The answer was nothing. No appreciation, no defense at a dinner table, nothing but the obligation to continue being timely. That was the night I accessed my file cabinet. I keep my important documents in a gray metal cabinet in my home office, the mundane kind that contains the actual structure of a person's life. Bottom drawer, behind the hanging files. There was a thick folder I hadn't opened in years, the closing documents from when I bought the house. I carried it to the kitchen table and spread everything out. No glowing screen this time, no laughter, just paper. There it was, page by page. The deed recorded with the county, grantee listed plainly, Claire M. Henderson, the mortgage note, borrower of record, Claire M. Henderson, the closing statement, the escrow documents, the title insurance, the entire framework of ownership, with my name on every crucial page. I sat there and traced my finger down the deed. I'd always known this, but seeing the physical proof on your own table is different. The house everyone called Mom's house. The house where they gathered to ridicule me. The house my mother claimed to have preserved through her own determination. That house was legally mine. I had been the owner and the tenant of my own family's disrespect at the same time. I'd funded the roof over their heads while they dismissed me as worthless. I clicked my pen once and set it on the deed. The remaining confusion vanished. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I just had to execute it so cleanly that no one could label it cruelty. The next morning, I did what I'd avoided for years. I returned to the workbook with the individual tabs and highlighted the entire column of payments, every transfer, every account. I let the spreadsheet calculate the total. The number appeared on screen. I won't speak it aloud because the amount isn't really the point. But I'll tell you it was substantial, enough to purchase the house multiple times over. It was a retirement account I didn't possess. It was more than I'd feared. Here's the strange part. I didn't cry about the money. Money is just numbers, and numbers don't wound me. What affected me, sitting there with that total glowing, was the time. 6 years of evenings I'd sacrificed, of opportunities I'd declined, of vacations I never took because the first of the month always arrived. I allowed myself to cry for about 4 minutes. Then I wiped my face with the back of my hand, the way my father used to, and I was finished. Because emotion isn't a strategy. I finally understood what my mother meant in that video. She said I should be grateful. And she was right about one thing. Someone in this family should be grateful. But it wasn't me. Every single one of them was deeply grateful for exactly one thing. That in 6 years, I had never once calculated the total. The first real test came from my brother. His text about truck insurance was still waiting. Before, I'd have paid it immediately. This time, I waited a day. Then I responded with one line, calm and without anger. because anger gives people something to resist. I can't cover that this month. That was it. No explanation, no apology. A clear boundary needs no defense. My phone rang before I could set it down. My brother, of course. The sweetness evaporated within seconds. "Since when?" he demanded. "You've got those clients paying you. What are you saving for to feel superior?" I stayed quiet, which only made him louder. "You think you're above us now? With your spreadsheets?" And then, because he couldn't resist, he said it. "Don't pretend you're not still the failure, Claire." There it was again. The same word from the same person. Except now I was hearing it directly. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, "Okay, Derek," and ended the call. After that, the phone didn't stop. A family that never calls to check on you will call constantly when the money pauses. My sister first, accusing me of selfishness. Then a cousin I hadn't spoken to in a year, suddenly concerned about family unity. Then my mother, the heavy artillery. She sent a text, perhaps because she wanted it in writing, "After everything this family has done for you." I read it and almost laughed. I opened my workbook to verify, just in case I'd overlooked something. Some column where assistance had flowed the other direction. There wasn't one. Everything this family had ever done for me fit perfectly in the empty space below the totals. I placed the phone face down and didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I retrieved a stack of plain manila envelopes from my desk and arranged them on the table. I smoothed the first one flat. I wasn't certain yet what words would go inside, but I knew what I was building. I considered carefully how to proceed. I could have posted everything in the family group chat, shared the totals, named who'd taken what, let them read it on their devices and feel the floor drop. I could have called each one and spoken the painful truths I'd been swallowing. I could have made it loud, but loud was their language, not mine. Loud keeps you in the room, arguing, explaining, defending, and I was exhausted from being in that room. So I chose the opposite. I developed a plan with 4 elements, and I wrote each one down so I wouldn't weaken at the last moment. 1. I'd transfer the deed back to my mother and provide the means for her to assume the mortgage. 2. Every voluntary payment, the truck, the rent, the tuition, would end on the 1st. 3. I'd present each of them with an envelope containing their complete records and a letter stating when support would cease. And 4. The most critical element, I would not engage in debate. I'd speak my truth, deliver the envelopes, and walk out. I wasn't going to fight because fighting keeps you connected to people. I was going to close the account and depart, and the calendar had conveniently selected the day for me. The next payment was due on the 1st. So was my mother's 60th birthday party. I decided to let timing make it appear like destiny. I called a CPA friend and a real estate attorney. The house was mine to transfer however I wished, but the attorney warned me, and I already knew this, transferring the deed didn't eliminate the mortgage. The loan remained in my name unless my mother could qualify to assume it. The gift came with its own weight. The attorney studied me carefully when she said that, checking whether I understood what I was choosing. I told her I understood completely. I wasn't trapping my mother. I was handing her the real burden she'd pretended to carry for 6 years. Let her experience its actual cost. The party continued planning around me, operating on one assumption, that I would handle everything. I'd paid for the hall months ago. I was covering the catering, and there was a secondary assumption beneath the first. Everyone expected me to deliver a toast, the dependable daughter, celebrating the strong mother who'd held everything together. My mother had been telling everyone for weeks. A neighbor mentioned it at the grocery store. "Patricia says you take care of everything. She's so proud. Her little accountant." I smiled and moved on, but in that moment, I finalized my decision. They had unintentionally provided me with a stage. A room full of witnesses, the entire extended family, neighbors, the minister, all waiting for the grateful daughter. I would keep the stage. I would keep the audience. I would simply change the script. The day before the party, I visited the hall to check preparations and received one final reminder of why I was doing this. My brother was there hanging decorations, drinking beer in the afternoon, entertaining younger cousins. When I entered carrying glasses, he pointed at me and announced loudly, "Careful, don't upset the ATM." "She's been moody lately." The cousins laughed nervously. My sister was arranging flowers, and when I mentioned a question about the caterer, she waved me off. "Claire, no one wants to hear about invoices at a party." My mother swept past, adjusting my sister's dress, never acknowledging my presence. Then my cousin Haley, 19, caught my eye. Her expression changed. She'd noticed everything. "Don't upset the ATM." He'd said it like a joke. But jokes are just cruelty with a smile, and I'd been the punchline for as long as I could remember. Tomorrow, I would finally rewrite the ending. Haley followed me outside. She's a good kid, the only one who texts me on my birthday. "Are you okay?" she asked. That one question nearly derailed everything. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't want her to misunderstand my actions as cruelty. "I'm fine," I told her. "Better than I've been." She frowned. "They take you for granted. You're the only one who shows up for me." And that locked it in. The kindest thing I could do for her wasn't to absorb the mistreatment quietly. It was to show her that you can stop. You can love people and still refuse to be their target. I squeezed her hand. "Find me tomorrow after I speak." That final night, I assembled everything at my kitchen table. The envelopes were lined up. Into my mother's, I placed the new deed, the attorney's letter explaining the mortgage assumption, and her full ledger. Into my brother's, his column of expenses, truck payments, insurance, loans, with the end date clearly marked. Into my sister's, 4 years of rent and the same termination date. I sealed each one and wrote the name on the front. My pen moved without hesitation. My phone remained face down. I didn't need to watch the video again. I had it memorized. And anyway, the laughter was about to lose its power. 4 envelopes. No speech to memorize. I'd spent 6 years saying yes without speaking about it. I could say no the same way, quietly, in writing, where it couldn't be debated. The church hall was full by 4. Folding tables, sheet cake, a banner with glitter already falling. My entire extended family, neighbors, the minister. My mother stood near the cake in a new dress, accepting admiration. She was telling her favorite story. After Frank passed, someone had to keep this family together. I did what needed to be done. She caught my eye and gave me the signal. "You're up soon." When the cake was cut, she tapped her glass. "I think my daughter Claire would like to say something. She organized all of this. She's good at managing things." Polite applause. The expected gratitude. I stood, perfectly calm. I didn't have a glass. I had the envelopes. I clicked my pen once. I brought something more accurate than a toast. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate my mother." I meant it. Then I picked up the first envelope. "Mom, this is for you." I placed it in her hands. "It's the deed to the house. It's been in my name for 6 years. Tonight, I'm transferring it back. The house is yours again." Confused murmurs spread. My mother's smile faded, along with the mortgage, which I've carried every month. Then I picked up the next 2. Derek, Megan, I set them on the table. Inside is a complete record of what I've paid for this family. Every bill, every transfer, 6 years of them, to the penny. I didn't inflate anything. I simply recorded what's true. The murmuring grew. My brother opened his envelope, his face draining. My sister remained frozen. My mother stared at the deed. I continued calmly. For 6 years, I was told I should be grateful. Tonight, I wanted everyone here to understand who was actually carrying what. My mother shot up from her chair. "How dare you?" She screamed. "How dare you do this at my party? You've always been like this. Jealous. Dramatic." The deed slid to the floor. "You think papers make you better than us?" My brother was on his feet too. "A few receipts, and you think you're superior?" My sister finally opened hers and began to cry, panicked tears, not remorseful ones. The room was frozen. Everyone watching my mother scream on her birthday. And here's what matters. I never raised my voice. I waited until she ran out of words. Then I said quietly, "I'm not asking for thanks. I'm not asking for an apology. I'm just finished paying to be your joke." A neighbor near the back spoke loud enough to carry. The pathetic one was the one keeping everything going. I watched the truth travel across the room, face by face. Haley crossed to stand beside me and took my hand. I placed the final envelope on the table, the schedule with the end dates. I turned to the room, not to my mother or brother, but to everyone. "Thank you again for coming. 60 years is significant." I retrieved my coat. "The payments stop on the 1st, I announced simply. "The house is yours now, Mom." I buttoned my coat. Haley walked me to the door. Outside, the cold air was refreshing. My phone was dark, no messages requiring attention. I drove home to my own small house, the one with my name on the deed and no one else's expectations inside. I didn't slam any doors, I just stopped holding them open. The consequences arrived faster than expected. My mother called the bank and discovered the actual monthly cost. She couldn't manage it alone, so she refinanced what she could and reduced her spending dramatically. My brother sold his truck within a month. He could have made those payments all along, he simply never needed to. My sister moved to a smaller apartment and found part-time work, her first job in years. The family narrative became that I'd abandoned them, humiliated my mother. Some relatives believed it. Those who were present, who witnessed my mother's outburst and read the totals, grew quiet and distant from her. I didn't defend myself. The ledger spoke for me. When an aunt called to lecture me about forgiveness, I responded simply, "I'm not seeking input on this," and ended the call. It's a complete sentence. It closes accounts effectively. Life grew quieter, then better. I accepted new clients. I took a weekend off and drove to the lake without a single spreadsheet. I'd forgotten what my own time felt like. A month later, my aunt texted, "You did the right thing." I'm sorry I didn't. It was honest, and it cost her something to send, but it wasn't sufficient to undo years of silent complicity. I replied, "Thank you, I appreciate that." And I left it there. I didn't invite her back into my life. Understanding someone doesn't require continuing to support them. The relationship I preserved was with Haley. She calls now, not asking for anything, just to talk. She visits, and we cook together. It's reciprocal. That's the only family ledger I maintain anymore, where both sides contribute. The others have my contact information. They know where I live. The door isn't locked. I'm simply not standing in it, holding it open anymore. If they want to walk through, they can carry their own weight. I learned something at that party I wish I'd known years earlier. Generosity isn't an ongoing debt your loved ones can collect from you forever. When you finally balance the account, you discover who valued you and who only valued your resources. The cost of being a safety net is only visible when you stop being one. You don't have to burn bridges, just stop paying the toll. That's my story. 6 years of silence. 4 envelopes. One birthday that finally revealed the truth. If you've ever been the one quietly supporting others, the dependable person no one acknowledges, let this be your signal. You're permitted to stop. You can set down the weight and still be a good person. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment and tell me your own experience. And if you enjoyed this, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories from Winds of Thought. I'll see you in the next one.